Hi everyone, welcome back to Coffee, Books, and Rain, where we do actually have a bit of rain outside. Sadly, we are lacking in the coffee department, but we have a big thing of water because we're trying to stay hydrated, and we always have books. Funny enough, I received this book in the mail earlier. Actually, it was yesterday, but I checked my mail today and it was there. So, Vicky Voland and the Goblins, Ghosts, and Ghouls, and it is by S.P. Witchell. And I am so excited. I have not yet read it because, of course, I just received it this morning. But I wanted to put it here just to highlight that this author did reach out to me and asked if they could send me a book, and I said please do. It sounded really cute, it sounds really cute, and I am excited to give it a read. So just by the cover of the book, it already looks a little magical, hopefully a little spooky with ghosts and ghouls and goblins and such. And anyway, that should be coming up probably in the next 2 weeks or so. I do have a couple other books that I will be reading and recording first. Then I will be diving into that one probably in the early parts of May. But today we are talking about a book called The Sea Gives Up the Dead by Molly Olguin. And I hope I'm saying that right, Olguin. Anyway, here's the cover over here. And it is expected publication of April 29th, 2025. And this is a collection of short stories. So I would definitely say you're able to read each of them kind of independently of themselves. It's about 150 pages in paperback. It's not very long. And even the audiobook was only somewhere around 5 or 6 hours long, so not incredibly cumbersome to get through. Now, let's dive into the summary first, and then we will talk about my thoughts. This may not be the longest episode because, of course, we only have 150-ish pages, and I'm not going to talk about every single short story in this particular book. I just want to kind of hit a couple of highlights that I ran across. So, The Sea Gives Up the Dead is a collection of stories sprinkled into the soil of fairy tale, left to take root and grow wild there. A lovesick nanny slays a dragon. The devil tries to save her mother. A girl drowns and becomes a saint. 3 kids plot to blow up their dad. A grieving mother sails the sea to find her son's grave. A scientist brings a voice to life, and a mermaid falls into the power of a witch. Here, historical fiction, horror, and fantasy tangle together in a queer garden of love, grief, and longing. So that's the only summary we have, which is pretty much the very first tagline. It's a collection of stories sprinkled into the soil of fairy tales, left to take root and grow wild, is a fantastic sort of description for this particular read. These are not what I would call traditional reads, and I know just recently we just covered a book called Exit Zero, which was also a collection of short stories. This one's a little different because these feel far more kind of supernatural and fantastical than maybe even those did. They both have a very similar sort of experimental feel to them, but this one a little bit more so feels like it leans into the fairy tale genre a little bit more. And so we do I'm not going to start with one particular one. I'm just going to kind of start with one of the stories that caught my attention. And we run across a family that's living in California, and there seems to be about 3-ish brothers who live with their dad and mom. And it's like the mom was desperate to have a baby girl, so ultimately they finally had a baby girl. But things just go really horribly wrong for this family. Like the first son is born, and then the second son is born. Well, then the third son is born, but the mother is she is absolutely despondent. She's having postpartum after this third boy, until she starts dressing up the little boy like a girl. And so now the mother is more or less kind of happy again. The father is just kind of like trying to he's not helping the situation, but anyway, he's like, okay, well, at least, you seem fine. Well, the father's a not so great dude, and he puts the three boys to work while the little baby who's comes, like, the third boy, he stops being his mother's little angel when the fourth child arrives, and it is a girl. And so now this fourth little boy, the third little boy, kind of has an identity crisis a little bit, because the name that his mother had been calling him is now the name of his baby sister, and he no longer dresses like, or he's no longer dressed up in dresses and such. He now is got his hair cut, and he is now gets to be the person that he always was. So a little bit of an identity crisis though for him, because his mother throughout his younger life had pretty much referred to him as a little girl. Anyway, the father's very hard on the actual three boys, puts them to work at his little diner that he bought, and the only way that these boys can kind of seek retaliation against their father for something that he has done is that they think, okay, well, when he goes to work, we're going to turn on the gas and he's going to blow himself up. Which kind of helps and kind of doesn't, because more bad things happen along the way. And it's kind of like that's where the story ends, is after some of the more bad things happen, it's like the story abruptly ends. So I don't know if we as the readers get to kind of interpret our own endings or what, but some of them are very much, in my personal thought, like a Grimm's fairy tale. They are darker, they are grittier fairy tales. These are not the Disney-fied fairy tales. As referenced, a girl drowns and becomes a saint. Now that one, very interesting, because it seems as though this girl was swept away in a flood, and somehow her physical body makes it up to Oregon, and I want to say that she supposedly had floated away from somewhere near LA or California. Well, somehow her body makes it up to Oregon, and it does not decompose. It does not break down in the way that most bodies will, especially after being exposed to water for so long, especially just time. Her body does not do that. The only thing is that her chest seems to be like open almost surgically, and her lungs have been removed, but even that looks almost pristine. It like something has happened for her lungs to have been removed. Well, like there's talks of maybe she's a saint, maybe she's like an angel, maybe she, these sorts of things. There's no real what do they say? They have to have 3 miracles or something like that. So they're not certain if they can really call her a saint yet. But as the story progresses, people seem to find like lungs throughout the world. And so each of them kind of claim that they belong to the girl, kind of this saint-like girl. And it's just very interesting how the story progresses. Now, again, it doesn't really have the best satisfactory ending. These stories are really speculative in a lot of ways, but they're intriguing too. I cannot put a finger on why I was so kind of enraptured with some of these stories. I guess I was just listening because the author, her style of writing and the way she creates the story is so intriguing to me. I will say there was only one that I remember I could not listen to, and it was one about puppies. Now, that's all I'm going to say, but for me, I just couldn't listen to the whole thing. I did have the audiobook for this, which I think also having someone narrate these stories was kind of like listening to very dark, disturbing fairy tales. But the one about puppies kind of bothered me the most. So that one was probably the only one I couldn't work my way through. And I'm wondering if I don't know. I'm just there's I understand that a lot of these have a theming of water. So the sea gives up the dead, and I feel like the sea gives up the dead could be if again, I had the audiobook, so I don't know if these were titled chapters, but the one for the girl who becomes a saint could have possibly been the sea giving up the dead. Um but just very, very interesting. And the final story, which feels kind of like a reverse Little Mermaid story, probably the best way I can think of that, to say that without giving too much away. Just fascinating. If you have the opportunity, if you happen to see this book, I do recommend picking it up and maybe reading one or two. I am glad that I did, but I guess I still have so many feelings. Like, I almost want to listen to it again just to kind of hear these stories again, because they're not long stories. And just see if I pick up on anything different the next time through. They, like, even the one with the dragon and the nanny, the lovesick nanny, just fascinating, because I do, like, in my brain I'm picturing a dragon, but should I be picturing a dragon like that I'm used to picturing in fantasy books, or should I be picturing something different? It just sends my brain spinning when you give me concepts that I feel have been talked about in different ways, but you present it in such a way that you do have to sit and think about it, because it's not the normal way of presenting it. So it can be a little confusing. And I can see where some people might not enjoy that, because when you pick up a story, maybe you're just expecting kind of a similar format or a similar form and function that you have picked up in the past. This is not going to be that. This is not going to be something that feels incredibly familiar. I think it's going to feel really new. But it may be kind of abrasively new, because again, most of these stories don't have what I would call the happiest of endings or a lot of closure at all. These are my thoughts. These are my particular opinions, but I would recommend this for sure. So I'm going to kind of leave it there. I will give this story, or I'll give this book 4 stars, because again, I'm actually sitting here thinking about it now that I'm talking about it. If I want to listen to it again, it wouldn't probably take me an afternoon to re-listen to all these stories again and just see if I missed something in the process. Because, in a way, you're left wanting more with these stories, and you're left wanting just a couple more words to tell me what happens after the ending that she gives us. But with all of that being said, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not liked and subscribed already, then I certainly hope you will. And I will see you all on the next page. Have a great one. Bye.